I'd like to welcome everyone to our 22nd TILO Presents webinar session. And today we will be learning more about Google Tools for ELA classrooms. My name is Carrie Rassak, and I'm the Integration Specialist at Rossford Schools in Northwest Ohio. And I will be kind of moderating the session, and very happy to introduce the presenter for today's session is Danielle Filas from Village Academy Schools. So I'll let her, let her take over and introduce herself and get started away with the session.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Terry. It's really a pleasure to be here and to be able to share some of the tools that I've gathered from all of the incredible teachers that I get to work with. Most of this is not my own making, as probably all of us can attest as teachers. So let's just get right to it, and please do feel free to ask questions. I do better when that's how things go. So I am going to share tools and pedagogical tips today that have more to do with writing than with reading, etc. And I am especially looking for ways to save time insofar as feedback goes. So a little bit about me. I'm Danielle Marie Filas. I teach at Village Academy Schools. We're a small independent school here in Powell, Ohio. As many independent school teachers do, I wear many hats. We are all Swiss Army knives in the independent school arena. I'm the technology integration specialist, the first that our school has ever had. I'm the language arts department chair. I'm the theater teacher and also the thespian director. And that keeps me pretty busy here. I'm a teacher by accident. I was a theater artist first in Chicago and fell into teaching by way of theater. I directed for a high school and just fell in love with it. You can see my very neglected little blog over at edunerdhq.org. I get to it when I can, but some of the tools you'll see today go into more detail on my blog. And on the social medias, you can find me at Ms. Filas, Filas. And I do use Twitter as a personal learning network, so please add me so we can learn from each other. So, the technology can be really overwhelming, and I'm going to show you a bunch of things today. It's by no means all of the things today, but if you just come away with one new thing, I think that's perfect. Look at this with an improv mindset. So I come from an improvisation background, and one of the first rules of improv is that there are no mistakes and that there is no such thing as failure. So just try some of these things out, and usually they say if you can try it within the first week or two, that means you'll actually use it. I know we're most of us coming up to the end of the first term, so that might not be possible, but hope you can try some of these things and kind of go at it with a game intensity as opposed to we tend to take things so seriously. So the first tool I want to talk about is Google Classroom. And if you're a Google school, you probably have Classroom enabled. It's not quite a learning management system, but it's becoming more so. Really, the specialty of Google Classroom is in its ability to distribute, organize, and use as a communication tool. I like that I can create a template in Google Docs and have that template automatically distributed to my students. I love that I can ping pong the assignments back and forth. So what I mean by that is my students finish writing an assignment, they submit it to me, I can look at it, return it to them and say I need revisions, and they can send it back to me back and forth. I'll talk more about how that works as we move on. Now, Google Classroom keeps improving. Google lives its entire life in beta, and Google Classroom is no different. You do have to have a Google account to use it. Both you and your students need to have a Google account, but it's a new feature that you can use Google Classroom even if you're not a Google school. It used to be that you had to be a Google school, but they've just changed that. Now you can use it from a personal Google account, but it does have some drawbacks if you're not a Google school. You're only allowed to use it if you're a tutor, if you're doing homeschooling, or if you're an online educator. Otherwise, if you're using it in your school, they really do like your school to be a Google school. So just know that as you go forward. Perhaps if you're not a Google school yet and you're interested in it, some of the information you find here today, you could bring to your administrators and convince them that you really do need to be a Google school. It's free. So Google Classroom continues to integrate with all kinds of other apps that make our lives easier as English language arts teachers. It now connects with Quizzes, Kahoot, EdSite, Kami, Edpuzzle, Pear Deck, if you've played with that before, and all of that. Even Quizlet now, I can distribute my links to sets on Quizlet, which is really terrific. So that's one thing that Google Classroom has going for it, is it makes the distribution of all of those sites, because that can get pretty overwhelming as a teacher. Makes you kind of have a one-stop shopping place for all of those sites. One of the things I like to do in terms of writing through Google Classroom is that instead of giving students, say, I used to give students, say, 4 big writing assignments throughout the quarter, and they didn't always love all of these assignments. And now instead, I give students a bunch of writing assignments throughout the quarter, a buffet, if you will, of writing assignments. And then they choose near the end of the quarter which assignment that they started, which writing prompt they started that they really want to dig in and do some deep revisions with. So this gives them some voice, choice, and agency in how they're learning to write in the classroom. And Google Classroom allows that organization of all of their files to be really easy. So they're not digging through, gosh, in the old days, I remember literally digging through manila folders and binders and things to find their writing that they wanted to revise. Now it's all right there. In fact, it's a built-in electronic portfolio throughout their time at your school. So they're able to go through and find an assignment that, you know, hey, I really enjoyed that one and I think I can make it better, and pick that one to dig deep. And I found that to be really beneficial. So that can save you some time. That means you don't have to give deep feedback on every single assignment. You can pick the ones that the students really like to give that deep feedback on. I also like to rotate deep feedback, and Google Classroom can make that really easy. What I mean by rotating deep feedback is I can, in my head, no, I'm going to pick 4 people. Usually I start with the top of the alphabet, and those students are going to get really deep, detailed feedback this week. And the other students will get generic, sort of simple feedback about their paper. The following week, I'll do the next 4 students to get that detailed feedback. So the way Classroom makes this easy is I use the private comment feature in Google Classroom, and I write a comment on everybody's. I'll write week 1, and then I'll give them the feedback. For the students I've given deep feedback to, I just put a little asterisk before the week 1, and that tells me at a glance as I'm looking at the class list, okay, these guys got their deep feedback this week. Last week, I'm going to make sure these guys get it this week. So I can kind of see how I'm moving through the list with that intense feedback. Saves a lot of time, because we can't often spend 20, 30 minutes on a paper when we've got hundreds of papers to give feedback on, but we can give everybody the benefit of feedback, maybe just not all at once. Google Docs are primarily the way I share assignments, and sharing is one of the best features about Google Docs, is the collaborative features and the ability to share. And of course, you probably all know that Google Docs can be shared in an edit format, a comment format, and a view format, and that can be really handy, especially in peer feedback. I'll get more into that in a moment. But what you might not have noticed, and you can see on this little animated image that I've got going up here, I'm always afraid to say the word GIF, because seems like when I say GIF, people get mad, or when I say GIF, people mad. So I've taken to saying animated image. Is that a cheat? Perhaps. But you can see here that now you can set the Google Doc sharing to expire. So if this can be quite useful in terms of peer feedback. So you can keep somebody's paper open for a limited amount of time, and then that sharing will shut down. So you can use that for timed writing. You can use that in writing workshops, really anything with a deadline. And notice too, excuse me, I'm battling the December teacher cold that everybody gets. Notice too that you can block collaborators' ability to copy or share. So even if they highlight text, they aren't able to copy it and paste it, and they certainly aren't able to share the entire document, nor are they able to copy that document. This can help cut down on those who might copy and paste a friend's work or copy and paste something for a friend in another section. Do note, however, that's not perfect. Of course, they can still take screenshots. So do know that as you go. But it's a nice feature. It's one more hurdle for them to maybe just make it easier to go ahead and write their own work. I also like the suggest feature in Google Docs. I don't use it as a teacher. I find that if I go through and make suggested edits for my students, they just click that check button and kind of blindly accept all of my hardworking edits that I've given them without really learning it for themselves. And I'm going to tell you how I give feedback later that sort of forces the students to listen to my feedback and do the work themselves for the editing. I've got several ways to do that, but the suggest feature is terrific for peer feedback. You can assign peer feedback to students, and you can drop in, and as you can see, it says what the name of the student is who gives the feedback. They can have a little conversation about it. If somebody says this word needs to be changed and other people go in and agree with that, then the person gets real feedback about their work in a group setting. I'll talk more about peer feedback later, but that suggest edits feature is really nice for that. I also like how simple it is to insert comments. It's a newish interface. You have to do, they're just less clicks than you have to use now. And those comments can be really helpful. If you're on my presentation slide deck, you can actually use this little gadget here, the link. You can go ahead and use that to click and play with the comment feature if you'd like to. Most of my slides, by the way, are clickable, so any of the features that you see, you can use. Google Keep is, if you haven't been playing with Google Keep as a teacher, this is a wonderful time-saving tool. I like Google Keep because I don't know if, like me, you have been finding that you make the same comments over and over and over. I have this weird rash of students who seem to, even though I teach 8th grade, have seemed to have just forgotten that capitalization has rules, and we don't just randomly capitalize things, nor do we just sometimes decide we're not going to capitalize anything. So I'm tired of typing out the same comment over and over and over. So what I've done, and again, this is not my idea. You can, 100 teachers have done it before me, but I thought I'd share it. I have a Google Keep account. It's just keep.google.com, or you can click this link that I've got on the slide deck here. And I've made a note with my common proofreading comments that I make, and I keep adding to it. You'll notice that I've also included in that a link to a resource that helps the students see the rules and see where they can get more information about the rule I'm talking about. So all I do is go into the Google Doc, and you can now insert from Google Keep notes. So you'll see in this animated image that I'm going through that process, and it opens up in a panel on the right. I simply create a comment, highlight and copy the comment from Google Keep, and paste it into that comment. It's super easy. What's really nice is that you can also share that Google Notepad with people in your department or in your grade level, and you can all together create a shared resource of common proofreading comments. We found this to be really helpful so that we're sure we're all using the same vocabulary, and we even have gone so far as to make grade level Google Keep. We could even go so far, I should say, is to make grade level Google Keep comments that you can all just share from. So that is a really quick way. I know those little mechanical feedback items in writing feedback in an English language arts classroom can be so time consuming. And this is one way to cut down on the just sort of rote typing that you have to do. So that's Google Keep. That's one of my
Danielle?
favorites. Yeah.
Quick question on that. Did you say you had a link to your actual comments somewhere?
Oh, I don't, but I
Okay.
could sure make that available after the
That's fine. Yeah, I didn't
I
know
could
if
sure
you were-
make that available. We just keep adding to it.
Exactly. Yeah, just as a starting point, just to,
Yeah.
I'm sure many are the same. Okay.
Yeah, and they are. And I think I think it's really good that we are able to work as a department to do it, because we have our own way of talking here at Village Academy. We have our own style and our own vocabulary and our own focus. And I'm sure everybody else does too. Probably brighter people than I could go sort of dig into, if you're a Common Core school, go dig into those Common Core words, and just then that way the kids are getting that feedback from a vocabulary that they're going to see on those tests as well. So it's brilliant. I love Google Keep, and I use it for a bazillion things. Kids can use it too, and my students have found a lot of use for Google Keep in other ways. And I could do a whole presentation on Google Keep.
Exactly. Okay, thanks. I'll add that. Yeah.
Sure. Another wonderful part about Google Docs is version history. It used to be called revision history. Again, Google, living life in beta, everything's got to change. And what version history does is just keep track of all the versions of your document and of your student's document. If you distribute their assignments through Google Classroom, you are truly the owner of their Google Docs. If you are allowing students to attach their own documents, then you are not the owner, and you may or may not have access to version history. So just another shout out for Google Classroom. Now, version history allows you to see detailed versions of the document. So yes, we have students who will plagiarize. It seems to be kind of a howl right now in our hallways that students are doing this more and more. I think they get desperate near the end of the semester. And one way you can check for that is to go into their version history and just see how many times they visited the document. I had a parent tell me that her student was writing a horrible, mean, terrible paper for 5 hours the other night. And I said, yeah, that is way too long. They shouldn't be spending that long. We went into the version history, and well, student might have been in their room on their computer, but they had not touched my document since they opened it in class. So it can protect you in that way. But it's also great if you're doing that ping-ponging as opposed to just using it to police student activity. When students are doing the ping-ponging, a long document, like we did National Novel Writing Month, so my students all had long novels, and it was hard for me to figure out what they'd changed. So when you go into version history, you can dial back to look at the version, the newest version, and it will show you in green what the new changes were. So it's really quick and easy to see. You can also name versions, which is really nice. We have a document for my thespian club. That's our constitution. And whenever we make a change, we name the version so that if we wanted to go see what it looked like in 2016, we can still go see it then. So those named versions can be really helpful too. Anytime you see that little arrow next to the date, you can click that arrow and see a detailed version that's often minute by minute. That can be really helpful too. There's another tool that's helpful for kind of getting a sense of how students revise, and it's called Draft Back, and we'll talk about that later in the presentation. So once you've got a Google Doc, it's pretty time intensive to give students feedback and to grade. So one of the things I like to recommend is that you just choose 5 skills you want to see done beautifully in an assignment. Once you find those, kiddo is done. Until you find those, kiddo is not done. So that can look like this. You might say, I want you to write a compound sentence, and I want you to highlight that in blue or make that in blue ink. I want you to include a personification. I want you to highlight that in red. I want you to include a metaphor. I want you to include a simile, and I want you to stay in first person. I would just copy and paste this little rubric down into the bottom of the template that I share. And As soon as they've done all of those things, they're done. And you don't have to grade for everything on every paper. That will save you a lot of time. So if you're really digging down into personification, maybe that's all you need to really think about in that paper. Of course, you can put in whatever you want in there, but if you're just looking for them to be able to handle personification, maybe you don't need to worry about comma placement for just that one paper. Maybe that's one they could pick later to do that deep dive after they have their buffet of assignments. Another time-saving technique that's easy with Google Docs is, I call it the first 10 rule. I tell students I will give them deep feedback on mechanics and grammar, which is what usually takes me a long time, until I have marked 10 things. Once I've marked 10 things, I am not reading your paper anymore, and I'm returning it to you. And you are not done yet. So students quickly realize that they have to align their objectives with mine when we do this. And they realize, hey, if I proofread, then she might read my whole paper. If I don't proofread, she might not get past the first paragraph. And I've got no feedback on my work before it gets graded in its final draft. So that's another time-saving technique. And I love it because in Google Docs, I literally click insert horizontal line. I put a comment in and I say, I stopped reading here. And they have their 10 comments up above that. It only takes one round for them to get real on board when I implement the first 10 rule. In my rubric, I often have one column that's for grammar and mechanics.
Hold on.
Sure.
Can we go back to the 10 rule?
Yeah.
I had a question on that too.
Sure.
Says, are you extending deadlines for the first 10 rule, or do they have to submit within the original timeline?
Oh, that's a really great question. I have adopted the single column rubric, and I'm going to talk more about that. So what I really do is say they are not done with an assignment until they've earned an 85% or higher. It does take some reimagining on my part to administer work that way. So that first 10 rule is I'm giving them feedback. They have a grade from that point, but they can revise to improve that grade until we run out of time. And I'll talk about how I manage that. I did everything wrong for the first 3 years when I did that. So I can tell you what not to do and what's so far working with me. And that comes just a little bit later, but that's a great question. Yeah, you have to think about deadlines with that first 10 rule. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Yay, there's people out there. That makes me happy. Here's another time saver. I will tell them part of your grade is on grammar and mechanics. I am going to randomly pick a paragraph in your paper, and I'm going to look at mechanics and grammar in only that paragraph, and your entire grammar and mechanics grade comes from that paragraph. Then they start to realize, hey, I have no idea which paragraph that is. So if I want to gamble, I can just work on one paragraph. But if I don't want to gamble, I better keep all the paragraphs great. And it saves a ton of time. So if I'm looking at a 3-page paper, and I'm only giving feedback on the grammar and mechanics for one paragraph, it cuts down on my time immensely, but it also still gives them valuable feedback in what's going on with their writing. When I take revisions, it may or may not be the same secret paragraph from which I give those grammar feedback. The grammar feedback too. They love and hate this. There's like a gamified sense to it when I do this, and they think that's kind of fun. Which paragraph are you going to choose? But they also hate it because somehow they think I magically am able to pick the paragraph where they did the worst. But that's okay. I don't mind having that conversation. I also have adopted the maximum word count. We're often telling students it has to be at least 1,500 words. And what I find is we get really fatty writing with a lot of junk food. And in fact, in the real world, it's much more common that we have to write within a word limit. In fact, when students, I got this idea because I used to teach senior composition, and in that we had students practice writing college entrance essays, and they were freaked out because they only had, say, 500 words with which to tell their life story in a compelling way that made a college want to pick them out of the pile. And that's tough filtering and becoming concise with your wording is a skill that's really necessary and important. So I started doing maximum word count. So instead of setting a minimum, I did the opposite. I said you have to make, for instance, an argument incorporating 2 sources in 250 words or less. And if they put more than 250 words in, I literally cut out all of the rest of their words and graded them on those 250. It's a really fantastic skill. And P.S. it really helps cut down on your grading time to dig deep into 250 words instead of trying to struggle and hike through 1,500 words. Here's an example of one of those assignments. This is when Jessica Jones was a big deal. She's coming back, can't wait. I had 2 opposite articles, one saying that she's this amazing feminist and one saying that she's cheating at feminism. And I've linked the articles if you want to go look at those. I told students they had to write a thesis defending or refuting one or both of those articles. And so they could either say, yep, both of these are true. Nope, this one's true, whichever they wanted. They had to include at least one quote from each article to support their argument. And it was a 250 word maximum. I like using Google Forms for this kind of work because in Google Forms, I can use data validation and say that their answer can only be X number of characters long. But I can also use Google Docs for this. Google Docs is a little bit easier to read the end product, and I just check the word count as I read it and only read the first 250 words. It's a lot of fun. I used to do it prior to being a Google school where they had to fit it on an index card, their entire paper. And I ended up, I'm wearing old lady glasses. You might have seen at the beginning, probably because of that assignment. Google Docs makes it a little bit easier. So this is a word cloud that I made from a Google form that I sent to my 8th graders. I asked them, what makes good writing feedback for you? What kind of writing feedback do you enjoy and is helpful to you? So you're probably familiar with word clouds. The bigger the word, the more often the word was used. And it really was striking to me, that's why I'm sharing it with you, that feedback is so important and they want it to be personal and they want it to be specific and positive. They want to be able to write revisions. They want to be encouraged. And I thought if I had picked what good feedback looks like, my list would be just like this. So then I watched this video, and I can't show it to you because it's got copyright issues that are, that we're not allowed to show it through YouTube Live. But his name is Dr. Charles Lim, and Dr. Lim does a TED Talk. You can look him up for that. The good stuff starts around 8 minutes. And basically what he says is he's a neuroscientist, and he took musicians because he wanted to find out where creativity came from. And he designed an fMRI, which is a fancy machine that takes pictures of how your brain works, what parts of your brain are fired up. And he shoved musicians in this fMRI and had them do a couple things. He had them play boring scales and looked at how their brains looked. He had them play scripted solos, so solos that were scripted and that he was had given them, so they were reading it. So that's a different kind of creativity. And then he had them improvise. And he looked at how their brains looked on each. And he wanted to see what parts of the brain lit up for the improvising that weren't lit up for the other aspects. Now, what's really crazy is that not what lit up when these professional musicians played their music, but it was really interesting to look what parts of the brain shut down. And the parts of the brain that shut down were the parts, and it makes sense probably as an educator, the parts of the brain that shut down were those that self-monitor and self-regulate, those parts that create fear and shame. Makes sense. So in order to create, their brains decided, I need to shut down self-regulation, I need to shut down fear, and I need to shut down shame. So I started thinking about this as an educator and thinking about our traditional modes of feedback. and the kind of feedback that we endured as kids. We expect students to respond to feedback with a pioneering spirit, and we expect them to be inspired and want to revise and feel encouraged. But the final grade that we give them is underneath a paper that's covered with notes where we detail their mistakes. We literally hand them a list of how to self-regulate, of things they should fear, and of things to feel shame about. So we're essentially demanding creativity and self-expression while systematically doing what we can to their brains to deny creativity and self-expression. Whoops. So looking at this, look at our typical rubric. Here's a typical, not awesome, but a typical rubric. We probably all recognize it. I think I used this exact rubric some time ago. What's great about it is it puts every student on an even playing field, communication about expectation and performance. But what students really see is this. They see this is how to be terrible. So our intent might be noble, our impact might not be so noble. So if we consider the lessons learned from Dr. Lim's TED Talk, we know that whereas his research shows that in order to engender creativity, the brain needs to shut down activity in the lateral prefrontal cortex, namely inhibition, self-monitoring, and fear of making mistakes, in order to charge up the areas of introspection, self-expression, and creativity. So when we look at our standard rubric from that standpoint, we're really doing everything we can by highlighting for our students how easy it is to be wrong. So notice too that we spend 75% of our words in a rubric like this telling students how to fail. So you had talked before and asked, like, how do I do the grading and the feedback? How do I handle deadlines? Well, I rethought everything. This is called a single point rubric. Two big differences between this and the traditional rubric. The obvious one is that what's missing is the 4 columns of text telling students how to fail. The second difference is that it requires multiple swipes by the student to get into that mastery column. So students are done when their numbers are in the mastery column. It's the awesome column is what they're shooting for. And it's an ongoing assessment. So students are assessed and reassessed, which allows them to move from developing to the mastery of skills that are measured within the rubric. And it inspires and requires a completely different mindset on the part of the teacher and on the part of the student. And I definitely did not invent this. I'm probably coming to it rather late in the game, but down here is one great resource that you can use to go do some more studying about that rubric, that single point rubric. So I just take the single point rubric and I paste it at the bottom of a Google Doc template. And then I put in the comments for the student. I put in the numbers of how that student did in the most recent iteration of their paper in that column. So they see those numbers in the column and I return it to the student. They do their revisions, they often come in for a conference, and then they return it to me again and their numbers move. So I just replace whatever their grade is with their newest total on the rubric. Now, I can hear the teachers smacking their heads with their hands and saying, that's going to take so much time. Now you're grading everything 50,000 times. Yes, it's super true. Here are some things you can do to help with that. By the way, if you want more information about the single point rubric, check out Jeff Heil's WTF. That stands for Why Teach Failure. And it's great. It's a long piece that he did that's really wonderful, and he's hilarious. So definitely go check that out for more resources. So one of the things I do with that rubric is I set up a feedback deadline. So I say, any revision that you want to have, you need to get to me by Friday. I do my grading over the weekend. So I will give you feedback over the weekend. When you come in on Monday, there'll be fresh new feedback and a fresh new grade for you. You can spend that week working on it. And again, I take more feedback on Fridays. I give far fewer assignments because students are essentially redoing this assignment over and over and over until they get it. Some students, it only takes once or twice. Some students work on it all quarter long and never really get into that mastery column in all of the areas, but they all become better writers. And it feels like I'm spending more time teaching as opposed to in a little hole working with their paper instead of with the student. I'm spending a lot more time working with the student. Don't let them turn things in whenever they want. Don't feel obligated to give them feedback right away. That's how you go crazy. But that once a week deadline really works for me. And I don't mind giving part of my weekend to that. So I'm going to move on and talk about Google Sheets, because that's another terrific tool for the English Language Arts classroom. I recently used Google Sheets for theme tracking. So I created a Google Sheet and I distributed that through Google Classroom. And down the left column, you can see in this little static image here, is the theme. The second column shows the page number. The third column, students are asked to find a quote that relates to that theme. And then the column over on the right, I can't remember what it's chapter is column B, and column right is the actual page number. Then I asked them at the end of the week to write a short paragraph about that theme. Students then have a big Google Sheet that has many tabs with all of the theme tracked throughout the year. Now, or throughout the book. They hated doing this and they complained about it constantly. And then when they went to write their paper at the end, they were grateful that they had this. And they said grudgingly they had to admit that the theme tracker was something helpful to them. So a couple bells and whistles that I used in the theme tracker in the Google Sheets. There is something called data validation in Google Sheets. I love Google Sheets, by the way. I cannot get enough of them. So Google data validation allows you, over in this left animated image, allows you a drop-down list in a column. So notice I put in list of items, and then I pasted in the list of items that would be in that drop-down list. So list of items, and then I put in all of the themes separated by commas. I said reject input if it doesn't match with that. And now students could pull down those themes. So it helped to formalize the themes that they had to use. How did I get the pretty colors? I did conditional formatting, which is over on the right. So conditional formatting, you can add rules. So you can add rules to the cells that turn them different colors. So at a glance, you could look and see courage would be green. You could see prejudice would be a different color. And it just helped the students who are more visual to be able to quickly ascertain what theme they really wanted to work with and find the theme on their sheet. My students like conditional formatting as well. They'll keep track of how they're progressing in a large project, and they can color their progress as they go, so they can make it green, yellow, red. My senior comp teacher does that too, to track how they're doing on their big projects for her. She has a big sort of group Google sheet where she uses that, and she's able to quickly see who's falling behind through that. Alice Keeler, if you have not heard her name, drop to your knees and bow right now. She's one of the most incredible people that you can find. Follow her on everything you can for great ideas. I don't know how she ever has enough time to sleep. One of the things she uses Google Sheets for that I really like is Google Sheets for discussion. She actually created a little add-on for that. And so students go to this tab, it looks like this, and they can find a cell and type in what they want to, how they want to respond to that question. So you can have a very large class, a very quiet discussion through Google Sheets for discussions. And we often will use this before a Socratic seminar to get some ideas rolling before we actually sit down and talk, so that people can kind of gather their thoughts before they dive into Socratic seminars. So again, these kinds of assignments, you really want to rethink deadlines and due dates. Have students think about an assignment being done when the skill is mastered, as opposed to it's due next Friday. set up that weekly feedback schedule, and the scores change as the students change. The slide should have been a little bit earlier, I'm thinking. All right, let's talk more about add-ons. I talked about add-ons before. Add-ons for Google Docs, Google Sheets. Actually, now it's for slides and forms as well. And you can get add-ons, just follow the instructions here in this little animated image here. You just go to the add-ons menu in whatever app you're in and get add-ons, and you can go shopping for those add-ons. And EasyBib is one I really like. It helps students to create bibliography works cited, but there are tons of add-ons, more every day, for Google Docs and the rest. One of the add-ons that's great for a writing teacher is called JoZoo Express, with the little monkey. It's a Google add-on. There's a monkey checker. It's still in beta, but it gives students feedback about grammar and spelling, and it does that automatically for you. It's still in beta, so it's not perfect yet, but it does allow you, JoZoo Express, to give feedback. So the kind of trick I was doing with Google Keep, this add-on does that for you. It allows you to put feedback in at a district-wide level as well. It also allows you to keep and share rubrics that it dumps into student papers as well. The very best part about JoZoo Express is the support and response from the creators of this add-on. These guys are incredible. Literally, I wrote to them with a suggestion and they were calling me back, contacting me. We had a Google Hangout. They had it in a new version of their add-on like right away. They said they even called it the Danielle add-on or Danielle version. I was so excited, but they're fantastic and they're really responsive. So I love to give a shout out to JoZoo Express, and that add-on does a ton for writing teachers. My teachers really dig it. Orange Slice is another Google add-on. This one's really simple. It allows you to create analytic and holistic rubrics, also teacher and student rubrics. What I like about Orange Slice is it's really slick and easy to use. I have to admit, though, I really don't use either of these anymore because I just paste my rubric in, that single point rubric, and use that. And as far as feedback goes, I'm going to tell you in the next slide, I think, how I give my feedback now. It's completely changed how I do things. Grammarly is a Chrome browser extension, so you have to have a Chrome browser to use Grammarly, I believe. And it allows students to self-check for grammar and spelling as well. They can hover over underscored writing to find mistakes. It happens in real time. It even sends them feedback about their writing, what their most common mistakes were every week, I believe, and tells how rich their vocabulary is. They love that. There's a free version and a paid version. I've had all kinds of students, parents buy them the paid version because they like it so much. One caveat: ironically, it does not work in the Google suite of apps. You have to copy and paste stuff from these into the Grammarly site to have it checked. Sad, sad, sad. But it does work everywhere else. I don't know why they can't make it work with Google Docs. It makes me mad. Here's my favorite, Screencastify. This, above all else, has completely changed how I give feedback. It has cut the amount of time it takes me to give feedback by a lot. So Screencastify is basically a screen recorder. It works in Chrome. It's a Chrome extension and a Chrome add-on. The add-on just sits, or the extension just sits up in your Chrome bar, and I can screencast. So what I do is I take a student piece like this, and I'm going to try this. Carrie, you can tell me if things go crazy. This might be really pushing the limits of my Wi-Fi here. But here's my Screencastify video recorder. So here's an example of what I would do to give feedback. I get the student's paper up on my screen. I fire up Screencastify and make sure my microphone is working. I record. It should say 3, 2, 1 for me. 3. Oh, it's going to be real slow. I don't think it's going to work while we're broadcasting. But, well, yeah, it doesn't love me. Okay. You'll just have to trust me. So I record myself talking about the student work. So I might say, hey, I really like how you start with this. Edgar's day started like any other alarm at 7 a.m. I got confused right here. Maybe you need maybe there's a missing word here. Do you mean with an alarm or with his alarm going off at 7 a.m.? I like that you start saying it starts off like any other day, because immediately I know it's not going to be like any other day. Then I click stop. Once I've given all of the verbal feedback to my student, Screencastify makes a little video of the screencast that I made, and I'm able to either share it through Google Classroom to the student, or what I actually do is just paste it into the student's paper, into their Google Doc. I paste a link in and say, here's your response from week 1. They have to then watch and listen to me go through their paper. This cuts down on their ability to just blindly change things that I ask them to change by clicking approve. It cuts way down on how long it takes me to give feedback. I thought the kids would hate it because they'd have to sit and listen to their teacher, and how sick of listening to me are they by this point? And it means more work for them. They have to listen to what I say, watch it on a video, then open up their document and actually do the work. But they love it. They said it's like a personal writing conference. It's like I've gone home with them and sat next to them, and it's personal, and they really dig it. They said they make a split screen with the video on one side and the paper on the other. They click pause, they go through it. The video can either save on YouTube, which I don't use, or just in your Google Drive. If you're a Google school, you have unlimited Google Drive storage, so why not just do it that way? And they love it. They really dig it. And they've said that it's helped them a lot. Parent-teacher conferences, this was the #1 thing parents talked about with me, was how much they liked Screencastify and the video feedback of their student work. They said that they got a real sense of what I was trying to do as a teacher. When the students said they didn't understand, they could sit and listen to the video together. I love it. And so then I can, in the next iteration of their feedback, just make another screencast. It used to take me about 20-25 minutes per paper. It now takes me about 5 minutes per paper, and I would say that I get much more in depth in the video. Now, for ELL students, English language learners, I supplement this with written comments as well, because the students struggle. I talk really fast and they struggle to understand what I'm saying. So it's just a caveat if you have English language learners or anybody who struggles with audio learning. I promised Draft Back that we would talk about this. Draft Back is another extension. I've given you a link to go get it. And what Draft Back does is it allows you to it takes the version history that we were talking about and animates it. I'm going to see if that will work in my screen share. If things go wonky, Carrie, you can yell. So I have put Draft Back into my Google Chrome browser as an extension. So now when I go to a Google Doc like this, I have this button that says Draft Back. It says there were 275 revisions of this document. So this is a document that I share a lot. So I can click Draft Back here. It says, do you want to play the 275 stored revisions? Sure, I want to play it. Now it gives me an animated of that typing that I did. So you can see how students type, you can see how they revise. Sometimes what it shows me is that a student has paralysis through analysis. I'll see them type and then erase everything, type and then erase everything. So we sit down and talk about that. And I say, look, you aren't doing yourself any favors. I want you to type this time and never erase, just leave the mistakes in. Other times I will see students type a few words and then paste a giant chunk in, and then go maybe change a few words into their synonyms there. And that's when I know that the student may be copying and pasting from another source, and we have a little talk about that. That's called Draft Back. Oh, it's a lot of fun. They like to see how they type, and it's quite a bit of fun. We already kind of talked about this, so I'm going to blow through it. Not all assignments have to be super long. And this is one assignment that I made that was really successful, that was super short. It showed me a lot about how students were handling voice and mood in their writing. I used fakephonetext.com, but you can use any myriad of fake phone text little apps, little web apps that are out there. We were reading Romeo and Juliet. My students were appalled that when Romeo begins, he is actually in love with Rosalind and not Juliet. And they're like, he's a player. He's terrible. So I said, all right, tonight you're allowed only to create one text, one screen's worth of text. And I want you to do a text between Rosalind and Romeo. So this is just an example of one. If you get the slide deck and look at my presentation, I think I've got it so that you can click and see examples of student writing here, but this is wonderful. I love it. So note that they had to pick the time. So this student picked 4:11 a.m. They picked the screen name. They picked Romeo, hilarious. And this is the conversation. And I love that they use TextSpeak. They told me they wish that this app would say what time he sent these each. Like, was it 1 minute between the texts or an hour between the texts? So it gets them really thinking deep reading and close reading here. I love this. I think this is comedic genius from an 8th grader. I think Shakespeare would have liked it too. This was such a fun assignment. It takes no time at all to grade. Kids loved it. I had several kids do 5 or 6 different versions of this and tell me I did more than one. Like it was a bad thing. I also love Google Docs Story Builder. It's at docstorybuilder.appspot.com. It's just another way to think about storytelling. It mimics a Google Doc, and it allows students to create several different collaborators within that document. And they can name those collaborators. One common way English teachers have used this is to ask students to create a Google Docs story builder from the point of view of all of the authors that they read that year, or from different characters within a novel. So we just read To Kill a Mockingbird. So we could say, let's do 10 rules for life, and you've got to use 5 different characters within the novel and have them edit each other's work. This one that I'm showing, where the person did it at times in their life. So important things, and you can see that the user is growing in age. It's actually a beautiful little story, but I don't want to run short on time. You can look at that in the presentation. You have access to this story. It's a beautiful little story. There's also a Google app called Storybird. I keep saying Google app. That's not quite right. They don't call them that anymore. You can go to the web store to find this. And Storybird has several different options of really visual creations of stories. The one that I'm showing here is creating a poem. It starts with an image, and students can create poems. There are challenges that are put forth that you can do. So you can read the challenge and compete with people in the sort of Storybird society. You can share your work on social media. Some of the students, more sort of visual artistic students, really dig Storybird, and it's free. You can also do graphic storytelling with slide decks. You can do choose your own adventures, comic strips, and animated poetry. Each of these are linked, I believe, so you can click these and you can see resources. Eric Kurtz, who is another fantastic person in ed tech, these two were really stolen from him, so you can go check those out. And I'm going to show you what an animated poetry might look like using Google Slides. So this is just created using Google Slides, just animation of how you bring in text, and students can play with their own poetry and animate it, or they can take poetry from other authors and animate it as well. It shows how their understanding of the poetry, super quick to grade as well. Peer feedback is something that can be helped with Google tools as well. My big thing with that is to organize peer feedback by assigning roles to students. Here's an example of roles that students in a peer feedback group may be asked to take. So the author has jobs, and I created this little handout through canva.com. If you haven't played with Canva, also free, also links with Google, also incredible. The author has to specify their areas of interest. So what are you looking for? What kind of feedback are you looking for? Once they've done that, they don't get to talk. They just have to take notes, and they can use or ignore anything that people see. I ask at least one student to be a monitor, to keep an eye on things, make sure everybody participates equally, make sure the author's questions get answered, and make sure everybody behaves within their roles. I have a scribe or multiple scribes who have access to the documents. They should be good typers, and they insert questions and observations that were raised by the group and questions that were raised by the author. And then a prompter, somebody who reads the section aloud to begin the session and offers initial questions, observations about areas that were covered by the rubric. So in a story, for instance, the author might have said, these are the questions that I have about my story. And people, the scribe, might have put in what the workshop had said about that story. Google Forms is another really powerful tool. I like to pair it with Doc Appender. So Google Forms is another way to create rubrics. So I can create a rubric using a Google form. I can create teacher to student, student to student, or student to self feedback using Doc Appender. And I collect and archive peer feedback. Here's how it works. The first thing I do is create a folder, and then I create named documents for each student. This is time consuming. So you do have to name separate documents for each student. What you're doing is creating documents where all of their feedback from those Google Forms will land. So students get feedback from the very first day to the very end of the year, and it all lands in this one document that they have access to. It's great to do a self-reflection for them. Doc Appender is a Google Forms add-on, and it's a little bit tricky to use. It's a little bit of a rabbit hole to go down, but it is an add-on in Forms, and it takes you through step by step. The first thing you have to do is create a folder where those documents go, and then create what they call a picker question. So in this case, the picker question would be, which student are you giving feedback for? That picker question says, this needs to go to the folder called, or the document called John Doe. So that's what the picker question does. You also get to choose from the form what gets dumped into that target document. You can choose to put in the person who's giving the feedback's name or not. I do it anonymously. Note that you, as the teacher, always have access through the spreadsheet that is created by Google Forms to be able to see who gave what comment. So it would look like this. So I create a Google form, students give feedback to the Google form, and for student 1, the teacher gave this feedback, and here's the feedback the teacher gave. Then underneath it are all the other feedbacks that other students gave about the document that they were giving feedback on. This can be really tremendous for speeches, for instance. You can have students give feedback when others are giving speeches, and at the end of the speech, they have one document with feedback from everybody. And at the end of the year, they can read that feedback and create a self-reflection that can be pretty powerful. You may have heard of Doctopus and Gubrick. These are Google Sheets add-ons. You create a Google Doc template, a roster of your students in Sheets, and a rubric. You distribute your assignments and attach the rubric. You can do this with or without Google Classroom using Doctopus. So the Doctopus add-on asks you to okay all of these things. It's a little terrifying. Just say yes. Doctopus is trustworthy. Been using it for a long time. I distribute a template document. So for instance, I might have distributed for that 250 word assignment, this template, and then I make that template and distribute it in Doctopus using a roster that I created in Google Sheets. I attach a rubric, which is another Google Sheet that dumps the rubric into that graded Doctopus assignment. So I know I sped through all of that, but that's because I'm coming right up against my hour and I want to respect everybody's time. So I can definitely talk with you or give you more resources if there are any of these tools or ideas that you want to dig more into. Again, my name is Danielle Filas, teach at Village Academy Schools, and you can reach me at Ms. Filas or at msfilas@gmail.com if you want to email me. That is all I have for you, unless, Carrie, there are any questions out there.
I think that's it for right now. So, yeah, I think we're all good with questions.
Perfect. Perfect. I hope I didn't lose you all in that last barrage.
No, see, and it's going to be recorded so they can play it back and watch it over and over again if needed. Forward.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Carrie, and it was a real pleasure.
No problem. Thank you, Danielle, so much. There were so many wonderful ideas. I mean, this could be a whole year's course of trying these things out. And
tomorrow when you wake up, it'll all be different because that's how Google is.
That's all right, though. There's some things that have been around for a few years, so let's hope that a few others will be too. So
yes,
thanks
indeed.
again so much. And everyone watching this now or later, again, remember there will be an evaluation link on the YouTube page. I'll add that to the description as well as to the email reminder. And there'll be a couple more webinars next week. We've got on Monday, Christine Danoff will be doing one for K2 EdTechify Your Teaching, so K2 teachers. And then on Tuesday, Dr. Michael Martin will be doing Are You Techficient? So he's got some time-saving tips. And those will be our last two for 2017. And everyone keep right up here. We've got snow outside, so keep safe if you're up here and elsewhere. Enjoy your holidays if I don't hear from you or see you until next year. And again, Danielle, thank you so much for sharing this. I'm going to be definitely passing this on to our English teachers. It's a treasure trove for sure.
Thank you so much, and happy holidays.
Yep.